Hello there, and welcome to the sleepy science galaxy. Perhaps right now, you're lying there, eyes tired, your mind still quietly moving, even though your body deeply wants to rest. There is nothing wrong with that. It is simply the way the human brain tries to protect us, even when night has already arrived. In this video, you don't need to focus. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to remember anything at all. I only invite you to listen. Together, we will drift through the gentlest facts about Earth, a place where life has endured for billions of years, where the oceans breathe out oxygen for you, where soil, water, trees, and your own body are quietly working together so that everything can continue. There is no task here, only safety. And if you happen to fall asleep without even realizing it, that is completely okay. The beings that defy time and death. Humans often believe that time is an arrow. It flies straight forward, never turning back, never hesitating. We are born, we grow, we age, and we disappear. That familiar story has been repeated so many times that it has become a quiet anxiety, resting deep beneath our daytime thoughts. But Earth, if you listen long enough, has never told the story that way. Earth speaks of time like water. It bends, it seeps into cracks in stone, it evaporates, and then it returns. And life, from its simplest forms to its most complex, has learned how to exist within that flow, not by resisting it, but by merging with it. Far beneath the surface of the ocean, where sunlight is only a faint memory, there are creatures drifting silently, like thoughts that were never given names. They have no bones, no brain in the way humans understand it, no expressions. And yet, they carry within them an ability that forces scientists to reconsider the very idea of biological death. This species of jellyfish, when faced with injury, with cellular deterioration, does not move forward toward an ending. It goes back. Its specialized cells dissolve their previous roles, return to a primitive state, and then rebuild the body from the beginning. No memory, no regret, no resistance. Only a complete flexibility in the face of reality. If humans age with a fear of loss, loss of strength, loss of memory, loss of self, then this creature reveals another possibility, letting go of the old self in order to continue existing. Not immortality in the mythical sense, but immortality in Earth's biological spirit, not clinging to a fixed form. When scientists first observed this process, they did not cheer. They were silent, because what stood before them was not a miracle, but a question. If life can do this, then what is missing in our definition of the end? At another level, so small it nearly disappears from all human senses, there exists another being, not transparent, not soft. Instead, rough, slow, almost clumsy in appearance. But if the universe kept a list of its most resilient creatures, the tardigrade would be there, quietly, without needing a title. This creature can pass through conditions where even the concept of life becomes fragile. It can survive temperatures hotter than boiling water, colder than eternal ice. It can withstand pressures that crush metal and radiation strong enough to break DNA strands. When the environment becomes unlivable, it does not panic. It dries out. It contracts. It stops nearly all activity and waits. In this state, biologists call it cryptobiosis, a hidden form of existence. But seen through a meditative lens, it resembles a deep sleep of life itself. No dreams, no thoughts, no fear of whether tomorrow will come. When water returns, when temperatures soften, when the environment allows it. The tardigrade awakens. No memory loss, no weakness. As if time itself had never passed. J.B.S. Haldane once said, "The universe is not only queerer than we suppose, but queerer than we can suppose." And perhaps the strangest thing is not the tardigrade's endurance, but its calmness in waiting. It does not see pausing as failure. It sees it as a natural part of existence. Humans fear stopping, fear silence, fear empty spaces without progress. But life, in its purest form, does not divide time into success or failure. It only distinguishes between suitable and not yet suitable. And in ancient layers of soil, where forests once stood, where rivers once flowed, where footsteps remain without traces, there are seeds lying still, not sprouting, not growing, not dead. They carry within them a biological blueprint encoded thousands of years ago. When they are found, when they are placed into light, when they are given water, they awaken, carrying a past that does not know it has become the past. Those seeds do not know that the world has changed. They do not know of wars, of empires, of technology. To them, time is not a continuous flow, but a single moment stretched out, a perfect stillness. There is something deeply comforting in that image. Because if a seed can wait thousands of years without fear, then perhaps delay in a human life is not a mistake. Perhaps it is simply a form of hibernation we have not yet learned to trust. Biologist Lynn Margulis emphasized that life evolves not primarily through competition, but through cooperation. And the organisms that survive extreme environments are proof of this. They do not defeat their environment. They negotiate with it. They alter protein structures. They adjust cell membranes. They slow metabolic rates. They become slower, smaller, but more enduring. In frozen regions, there are organisms that allow their bodies to freeze completely. Ice crystals form inside their cells, something that for humans means death. But these organisms produce special proteins that control the shape of ice, protecting internal structures. When warmth returns, they thaw and continue living. No triumph, no drama, only continuation. Charles Darwin wrote, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." In this context, responsiveness is not a forceful reaction, but listening, knowing when to move forward, when to stop, when to dissolve, and when to rebuild. As you hear about these creatures, it is very possible that a part of you begins to soften, because they carry a wordless message. Life is not in a hurry. It does not count every second. It does not fear silence. It trusts that if not now, then another time will come. Carl Sagan once said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." If that is true, then those small, slow, silent beings are also the universe learning patience, not through the light of stars, but through the darkness of waiting. And then, as you lie there, in the quiet of your room, you may begin to notice that your body is doing the same thing. Your heart does not ask whether tomorrow will be okay. Your lungs do not worry about unfinished plans. Your cells are simply doing what they have done for billions of years, maintaining life, one moment at a time. You do not need to solve everything right now. You do not need to understand it all. You do not need to be strong. Life does not ask that of you. It only asks that you allow yourself to exist, just as it has always existed, through ice, through radiation, through silences longer than human history. And within that existence, there is a very ancient, very deep lullaby softly whispering, "You are still here." And that is enough. The quiet intelligence of nature. And when that thought settles, that life does not vanish easily, another door begins to open, more subtle, more delicate. Because if life is not only persistent, but also knows how to exist, then the next question, very gentle, very deep, naturally arises. Does life know more than we have ever assumed? From very early on, humans have linked intelligence to the brain, to electrical impulses, to neurons, to thoughts shaped by words. We believe that to understand, to decide, to solve problems, there must be a control center, a place where consciousness is concentrated. But Earth, through billions of years of patience, has whispered another possibility. Intelligence does not have to be loud, does not need to be centralized, and does not need to resemble humans. If you walk into an old forest very slowly, slow enough that your footsteps no longer feel like an intrusion, you may begin to sense something unusual. Not silence, but a dense form of presence, as if everything is listening to everything else, as if no individual truly stands alone. Beneath the soil, where tree roots weave together like ancient blood vessels, there exists a network that humans have only begun to understand in recent decades. Scientists call it the mycorrhizal network. But when describing it in more familiar terms, they use a very human name, the Wood Wide Web. Through fungal threads as thin as hair, trees exchange carbon, water, and minerals. But that is not all. They send signals. When one tree is attacked by insects, it releases chemical signals that spread through the underground network. Other trees, even those not yet harmed, begin producing defensive substances. No one gives orders. No one controls the system. And yet the entire forest responds like a single body. Ecologist Suzanne Simard, who spent many years studying this phenomenon, once said, "Forests are not just a collection of trees, but complex systems of interdependence." What gives that statement its depth is not the information itself, but the shift in perspective it invites. The forest is no longer a group of individuals competing for light. It is a conversation that has lasted for centuries. And if you listen to that conversation with slow breathing, you may notice that trees do not need brains to remember. They remember through structure. They remember through root distribution. They remember through chemistry. A tree that has endured drought will respond differently when drought returns. Not because it thinks about the past, but because its body has been shaped by that experience. At another layer of the living world, smaller than tree roots, exist organisms we often group together as fungi, microorganisms, as if they were merely background elements of life rather than central characters. Yet it is here that intelligence without a brain becomes most visible. There are parasites capable of altering their host's behavior with astonishing precision. An ant infected by a fungus will leave its colony, climb to a specific height, clamp its jaws tightly onto a leaf, and die. From its body, the fungus grows, releasing spores at exactly the right place, the right height, the right time. There is no consciousness, no plan, and yet the chain of biological interactions is so refined that it forces humans to pause and ask, who is knowing what here? Richard Dawkins wrote in The Selfish Gene, "We are survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes." That statement is often controversial, but in this context, it opens a strange perspective. Perhaps intelligence does not reside in individuals, but in the evolutionary process itself. In solutions that are tested, fail, adjusted, and preserved. Not in consciousness, but in structure. And then there's one organism that puzzled scientists for decades. It has no brain, no nervous system, no organs. It is simply a yellow-orange slime, moving slowly across moist surfaces. And yet, when placed in a maze with food at two ends, it finds the shortest path. When researchers change the layout, it adapts. When the experiment is repeated, it learns faster. The slime mold does not think, but it optimizes, and it does not remember through neurons, but it leaves traces in the shape of its own body. It calculates by expanding, retracting, and preserving the most efficient pathways. A form of intelligence without a center, without plans, without named goals. Scientist Benjamin DeLanda once described such systems as intelligence without representation. No symbols, no concepts, no language. Only sustained interaction with the world. Plants, in their own way, are doing something similar. They respond to sound. Roots can grow toward the sound of flowing water even before touching it. Plants can distinguish between vibrations caused by wind and vibrations caused by insects chewing leaves. They send electrical signals, far slower than human neural impulses, but sufficient to coordinate responses across the entire organism. Stefano Mancuso, a pioneer in plant neurobiology, once said, "Plants have a completely different intelligence based on a decentralized system." And within that difference lies a gentle reminder. Intelligence does not need to resemble us in order to be intelligence. When humans hear these ideas, there are usually two reactions: skepticism and amazement. But if you are listening to this story at night, when your eyelids are heavy, when your breathing has slowed, you may feel a third response, a sense of reassurance. Because if trees, fungi, and microorganisms can know without consciousness, then perhaps you do not need to think so much to exist correctly. Perhaps not everything needs to be controlled. Perhaps a great deal of life's intelligence lies in allowing processes to unfold on their own. Alan Watts once said, "You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself." If that is true, then Earth is not merely a place where life exists. It is a place where intelligence is being tested in countless forms. From word-based thoughts in the human brain to silent chemical signals beneath tree roots. And as you lie there, listening, you may realize that your body is also part of that network. The billions of microorganisms within you are making decisions every second. Not through thought, but through interaction. Your heart adjusts its rhythm. Your lungs shift their breathing. All of it happens without your intervention. You do not need to be more intelligent. You do not need to understand everything. Life knew how to function long before you ever asked a question. And within that knowing, quiet, distributed without a center, there's a lullaby deeper than any thought. You are being supported, even as you let yourself drift into sleep. Animals and consciousness. When we begin to realize that intelligence can exist without a brain, that forests can converse, that roots can listen, that beings without consciousness in the human sense can still choose and adapt, a very strange feeling starts to spread through the mind. It is not overwhelm, but release, as if an invisible weight has just been set down. Because if intelligence does not belong only to creatures that think in words, then perhaps consciousness is not a solitary lamp burning in the dark, but a wider, gentler field of light, embracing many different forms of life. And from here, as the question of intelligence settles, another question begins to emerge. Softer? Warmer? If trees know how to share, if fungi know how to guide, if microorganisms know how to adjust the behavior of entire ecosystems, then the creatures that move around us every day, the eyes that look back at us from very close distances, might they carry within them some form of inner experience? Not like humans, but enough to feel, enough to remember, enough to hurt, enough to bond. Humans once believed consciousness was a privilege, a crown placed at the top of the evolutionary ladder. But Earth has never respected straight lines. It prefers circles, branches, parallel forms of existence. And throughout its long history, it has repeatedly whispered that feeling is not the exclusive property of any one species. There are very small, very ordinary moments where this becomes most visible. When an old dog slowly follows its owner, not out of command, but out of attachment. When a cat seeks out a familiar place to quietly leave the world. When a bird stands still for a long time beside another that no longer moves. These moments were once dismissed as anthropomorphism, as emotions projected by humans onto nature. But science, slowly and carefully, has begun to look again. When researchers first placed mirrors in front of certain animals, they were not searching for intelligence. They were looking for signs of self-recognition. And what they found unsettled many old assumptions. A chimpanzee touches a mark on its own forehead after looking in the mirror. A dolphin turns its body, examining itself from different angles. An elephant gently touches a mark on its skin with its trunk. Not out of simple curiosity, but as if confirming something deeply personal. This is me. Biologist Frans de Waal, who devoted his life to studying cognition and emotion in animals, once wrote, "The line between humans and animals is thinner than we like to think." That statement does not diminish humanity. It widens the circle of recognition. It suggests that knowing one exists does not require language, that consciousness does not need to narrate itself in order to be consciousness. In a hot, dry land, where heavy footsteps leave deep impressions in the ground, there are creatures that carry memories longer than a human lifetime. Elephants live in complex communities, where individuals are remembered, where relationships last for decades. When one elephant dies, others return. They touch the bones. They stand still. They fall silent in a way that is different from ordinary stillness. Researchers have observed elephants changing their behavior after loss. They play less. They eat less. They seek each other out more. Jane Goodall spoke of similar moments among primates. There is no sharp line dividing humans from other animals. It is a blurred line, and the more we learn, the more blurred it becomes. Within that blur, grief ceases to be uniquely human. It becomes a biological response to absence. Elephants do not hold funerals with rituals, but they give time, and in the natural world, time is the most precious resource. Stopping, not moving, not feeding, not protecting, is a meaningful choice. It says that something has changed, that something was here, and now it is not. Far from there in the ocean, where sound travels farther than light, there exist wordless conversations that humans have only recently begun to hear. Dolphins call to one another, not with generic calls, but with distinct individual sounds, much like names. When one is separated from the group, others repeat that sound, waiting for a response. Marine biologist Denise Hertzing, who studied dolphins for more than 30 years, once said, Dolphins have individual signature whistles that function much like names. In a world without writing, without recorded history, to be called by a unique signal is profound. It means the individual is distinguished, remembered, called for when absent. When you call someone's name in the dark, you're not only locating them, you're affirming a bond. Dolphins, in their own way, are doing the same. Not because they are human-like, but because relationships are an effective evolutionary strategy. And emotion, in this context, is not weakness. It is adhesive. High in the sky, where flocks of birds form constantly shifting shapes, another kind of intelligence is at work. No individual bird knows the entire shape of the flock. No bird gives orders, yet the group moves as a single organism, avoiding obstacles, changing direction, landing, taking off, with a precision that humans attempt to replicate through algorithms. Crows remember human faces. Bees communicate the location of flowers through dance. Octopuses solve puzzles, open jars, escape mazes. But what matters most is not any single behavior. It is the fact that intelligence appears in many forms, within many structures, without obeying a single template. Philosopher Thomas Nagel once posed the famous question, "What is it like to be a bat?" The question was not meant to be answered directly, but to highlight a limit. That each form of consciousness carries its own subjective world, one that cannot be fully translated into the language of another species. But the existence of that limit does not deny consciousness. It simply asks us to be more humble. When humans try to define consciousness, we often search for reflections of ourselves. But Earth was not built to reflect, it was built to diversify. And within that diversity, feeling emerges as a continuous spectrum, without sharp boundaries. Cooperation is one of the clearest expressions of this truth. From schools of fish turning at once, to wolf packs coordinating hunts, to beehives functioning like distributed brains, where decisions belong not to individuals, but to the relationships between them. Intelligence here does not live inside heads. It lives in between. Biologist E.O. Wilson once wrote, "The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. But seen more broadly, perhaps the problem is not only human. Perhaps we have forgotten that emotions are not obstacles to overcome, but signals to understand. Because emotion, in its most basic form, is information. It is the body saying that something matters. When an animal avoids danger, that is fear. When it returns to its group, that is attachment. When it pauses beside a dead body, that is loss. These words are human, but the experiences do not have to be. And as you listen to these stories, it is very possible that something within you begins to soften. Not because you feel smaller, but because you feel connected. For if consciousness does not exist only in the human brain, then you are no longer standing alone in the universe. You are part of a chorus of feeling, where each species sings in a different voice. Carl Sagan once said, "We are not only in the universe is in us." If that is true at the atomic level, then it is also true at the level of experience. What you feel is not separate from what life has felt millions of years ago, in other forms, under other skies. And in this moment, as the night deepens, as the outer world slowly fades, you may allow yourself to rest in that thought. That feeling is not a burden. That you are not the only being who knows sadness, who knows memory, who knows attachment. That empathy does not weaken you, but places you exactly where you belong within the flow of life. You are not alone in awareness. You never have been. Between these feelings, between the gaze of animals, between wordless connections, there exists a very small, very slow layer of existence that we rarely notice. Somewhere beneath the ground, water is moving. Not the loud flow of rivers, but the patient seepage through layers of stone, through grains of sand. No clear destination, only continuation, molecule by molecule, carrying minerals, carrying the memory of mountains and rain. In the air, tiny particles of dust drift. Some were once pollen. Some were once volcanic ash. Some were once part of living beings long before humans appeared. They float, collide, change direction, following currents invisible to the eye. On the surface of leaves, microorganisms are born, exchange, disappear. Beneath your feet, in the soil, billions of small beings are decomposing, rebuilding, transforming. None of them know the whole story, but each one is doing its part. There is no clear boundary between the living and the non-living. No precise moment to say this ends here and something else begins there. Only transition, slow, soft, continuous. And when you allow yourself to sense these very small things, naturally, without effort, your perspective begins to widen. Not through thought, but through feeling. As if you are stepping back just enough to see the entire picture breathing. Earth as a living body. When we stop seeing the natural world as a collection of separate individuals, when we begin to sense that consciousness does not exist only in the human brain or in the eyes of animals, but also spreads through the invisible relationships between different forms of life, a very subtle shift occurs. We no longer stand facing Earth as spectators. We begin to be inside it, and from that position, a deeper, quieter question naturally arises. If everything is connected, if sensing and responding ripple through many layers of life, then is Earth itself operating like a body? The idea is not new, but it only becomes truly clear when science slows down enough to listen to cycles longer than a human lifetime. Earth does not think in our rhythm of days and nights. It lives through rotations lasting thousands, millions of years. And within those rotations, there are rhythms that closely resemble the biological rhythms of a breathing body. Carbon moves through the atmosphere, the oceans, the rocks, living beings, and then returns to the air. Not hurried, not lost. Like oxygen in blood, like nutrients in cells, carbon passes through different forms of life, carrying energy, information, and the chemical memory of what has existed before. A leaf falling to the ground does not disappear. It only changes form. The carbon within it becomes soil, becomes microorganisms, becomes gas, becomes part of the sky you are breathing. James Lovelock, who proposed the Gaia hypothesis, once wrote, "The Earth is a self-regulating system capable of sustaining life." When he said this, he was not mythologizing Earth. He was describing an expanded biological reality. The processes on this planet tend to keep living conditions within a remarkably stable range, despite large external disturbances. Average temperature, atmospheric composition, ocean salinity, all of these fluctuate, yet they rarely move beyond the limits that allow life to continue. There is no control center, no global consciousness. But there are countless small, interwoven feedback loops, adjusting one another, much like the organs in your body constantly send signals to maintain balance. From this perspective, forests are not merely collections of trees. They resemble the planet's slow lungs, not only because they absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, but because they regulate water flow, humidity, and even regional climate. Large forests generate rain. Water vapor rises from leaves, condenses, and returns to the ground, nourishing the very ecosystems that produced it. When forests disappear, rainfall changes. When rainfall changes, soil dries. When soil dries, life retreats. This chain of reactions requires no command. It unfolds like a biological reflex, like your body developing a fever to fight infection, like blood vessels constricting in the cold. The oceans, covering most of the planet's surface, are not a still mass of water. They are a vast circulatory system. Ocean currents transport heat from the equator to the poles, regulating the global climate. Phytoplankton, microscopic organisms drifting near the surface, produce most of the oxygen you are breathing right now. Not forests, not trees, but beings invisible to the naked eye. Rachel Carson once wrote in The Sea Around Us, "The sea, once it casts its spell, holds one in its net of wonder forever. But beyond beauty, the ocean holds a quieter role. It stabilizes the planet's breathing. Without the ocean absorbing heat and carbon, Earth would be an entirely different place, likely unsuitable for complex life. When we view these processes from a distance, they resemble physical systems. But when we look long enough, deeply enough, they begin to resemble physiology. Earth is not merely a stage for life. It interacts with life. It responds. It changes in response to the organisms living upon it. From the microscopic to the planetary scale, everything is linked. Bacteria in the soil affect plants. Plants affect climate. Climate affects oceans. Oceans affect plankton. Plankton affect the atmosphere. And the atmosphere, in turn, affects everything. Carl Sagan once said, "If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe." The statement reminds us that nothing is truly separate. A planet is not a backdrop. It is a process. And life is not a visitor. It is part of that process. As you lie there at night, listening to this story, you may begin to feel a very gentle shift. That your own body, with its heartbeat, breathing, temperature, is doing the same thing. You are a self-regulating system. You do not need to control every breath to stay alive. You do not need to command your heart to beat. You only need to allow the processes to happen. Earth is the same. It does not think about balance. It lives in dynamic balance. When one part changes, another responds. When pressure increases, the system disperses it. When conditions become harsh, life adjusts or withdraws, leaving space for other forms to appear. Lovelock later added, "Gaia is not a conscious being, but a complex system behaving as if it were." That "as if" is important. It does not demand belief. It simply invites observation. And in that observation, humans are no longer at the center. We become a cell within a larger body, not to diminish human value, but to place it in proper context. A cell is not meaningless. It lives, it feels, it contributes, but it does not exist independently. It depends on the larger flow. When that flow is stable, the cell is nourished. When it is disrupted, the cell is affected. In this sense, the feeling of unity is not an abstract idea. It is a biological fact. You are made of elements that once passed through stars, through rocks, through oceans, through other living beings. You are breathing oxygen produced by plankton. You are standing on land shaped by cycles longer than human history. And in this moment, as the night deepens, as loud sounds recede, you may allow yourself to rest in that thought. that you do not need to strain to keep the world running. Earth was doing that long before you arrived, and it will continue, with or without you. Your only task right now is not to understand everything. It is simply to breathe in rhythm. And as you let yourself drift into sleep, Earth is still breathing, still moving, still self-regulating, very slowly, very steadily, like a vast living body holding everything. Everything is still continuing, in a very familiar way. Earth is still turning without needing reminders. The day has passed. The night is here. There's nothing to complete. There's nowhere to go. Somewhere the wind changes direction, unhurried. Somewhere water shifts, little by little. Old cycles repeat, not exactly the same, but familiar enough to feel safe. You may hear it, or you may not. It does not matter. The story does not ask for attention. It is simply here, like the sky behind every thought. If your mind drifts, let it drift. If it returns, that is fine too. There is no right. There is no wrong. Only a steady rhythm, repeating, repeating. And with each repetition, everything grows just a little lighter. Humans, as part of the story, and as the thought of Earth as a living body slowly settles, as we begin to feel the ocean's unhurried breathing, the patient adjustments of climate, and the cycles longer than human history quietly at work. A very natural shift occurs. No intention is required. No effort is needed. The vast story begins to narrow, not to close, but to go deeper. From the planet, attention returns to the surface. From the surface to the beings who are listening. And then, very gently, very close, it reaches you. Because you do not stand outside Earth, observing it. You never have. You are within it, and it is within you in ways far more concrete than any abstract sense of connection. Your body, right now, is a community, not a single individual, but tens of trillions of cells, each carrying its own history, its own function, its own rhythm of life. They cooperate, exchange, sacrifice, and self-regulate, without needing your command. And even more than that, not everything living within you carries your DNA. In your gut, on your skin, in your lungs, there exists a rich, diverse, ancient microbial world. They help you digest food, train your immune system, influence your emotions, your sleep, the way you respond to stress. You do not control them by will. Yet if they disappeared, you could not exist as you do now. Biologist Lynn Margulis once said, "We are not individuals. We are collectives." This is not a metaphor. It is an accurate description. What you call I is a temporary agreement among many different forms of life, sharing one space, maintaining a fragile yet enduring balance. Even the genome you carry is not entirely yours in a pure sense. A significant portion of human DNA originates from ancient viruses, fragments of code that invaded your ancestors millions of years ago. Once threats, once disruptive to cells, have since been integrated, repurposed. They now participate in placental development, gene regulation, and the very reproductive capacity of our species. Life does not evolve only by eliminating. It evolves by retaining, transforming, and cooperating with what was once foreign. Those viruses are no longer enemies. They have become part of the story, and that story continues in every DNA replication, in every cell division, in every new generation that appears. When you view your body from this perspective, the boundary between inside and outside begins to blur. The air you breathe was once part of trees, of algae, of oceans. The water within you once flowed through rivers, through rain, through ice. The elements in your blood were forged in stellar explosions long before Earth existed. Carl Sagan once said, "We are made of star stuff." This is not poetry more than science. It is physical fact. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the carbon in every cell, were all forged in the hearts of long-dead stars. When you touch your chest, you are touching matter that was once light. And yet, the most remarkable thing is not the cosmic origin of the body, but how it functions in each tiny moment. Your brain, a soft mass of tissue working even as you sleep, operates through biological electrical impulses. Tiny sparks move across neural networks, giving rise to sensation, memory, thought, dreams. There is no separate soul controlling things from outside. Consciousness emerges from these very material interactions. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio wrote, "The mind is embodied, not just embraced by the body. Consciousness does not reside in the body like a guest. It is a process generated by the body itself. When your heart rate slows, when your breathing deepens, when hormones shift, your subjective experience shifts with them. This means you do not need to do anything to become part of nature. You never left it. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, has a biological, chemical, physical foundation. And those foundations are part of Earth, part of the history of life, part of a universe far larger than you. When you feel tired, it is not personal failure. It is a biological signal. When you need sleep, it is not laziness. It is an evolutionary rhythm refined over millions of years. Your body knows when to pause, just as forests know when to rest, just as oceans know when to absorb heat, just as Earth knows when to adjust. Alan Watts once said, "You are not a skin-encapsulated ego. You are not a sealed self, separate from the world. You are a point of convergence where many flows meet. And in this moment, as you are listening, those flows are slowing, aligning, softening. You do not need to strain to keep everything stable. You do not need to understand this vast story completely. Your body already understands in its own way. It is regulating temperature, repairing cells, filtering memories, sorting experiences, preparing for another day, or simply for deeper sleep. And within this resting, there is a very simple, very comforting truth. You are not a misplaced being on a foreign planet. You are a very specific expression of Earth temporarily taking human form. You belong here, in every possible sense. As that thought gently spreads, you may allow yourself to relax a little more. No need to hold yourself tightly. No need to resist the flow. Life has carried you here, and it knows how to carry you forward. One breath at a time, very slowly, very steadily, within a continuity that never truly breaks. Letting go and sleep. And when that final thought settles, that you are not separate from Earth, that your body is a very specific form of life, continuing itself, the story no longer needs to go any farther. It has completed its circle. Not with a clear conclusion, but by gently dissolving, like thin mist when the night has grown deep enough. Because everything that has been said, in one way or another, returns to the same rhythm. Life is not in a hurry. It does not give up. It does not need to be proven. It simply continues, quietly, persistently, and gently enough for you to rest within it. Somewhere beneath the surface of the sea, as moonlight spills down in pale silver bands, corals begin to reproduce. There is no sound, no audience. Millions of individuals release tiny seeds into the dark water at once, like countless small stars drifting slowly through the ocean. They do not know what will survive. They do not control the outcome. They simply do what life has learned over a very long time, to let go at the right moment. There's nothing dramatic about that moment, yet it carries a deep kind of beauty. Because in that letting go, there is no despair. Only a biological trust that the current will carry some part far enough. That not everything needs to be held. That continuation does not require control. In the night sky, as the air grows stable, there are birds that enter a very particular kind of rest. They do not land. They do not seek a nest. They sleep while flying, one half of the brain at a time. So the body remains balanced. So the wings continue to move. One part stays awake. Another sinks into sleep. There is no contradiction, only a very subtle adaptation. That image carries a gentle reminder. Rest does not always mean stopping completely. Sometimes, rest is allowing yourself not to guard everything at once. Trusting that one part of you can soften, while another remains safe. The poet and philosopher John O'Donohue once wrote, "At the heart of all beauty lies an invitation." The beauty of these moments is not their rarity, but the quiet invitation they carry. An invitation to let go, to stop trying, to be in the world without needing to shape it. Life, as you have heard throughout this journey, was never built on constant tension. It relies on rhythm, on cycles of opening and closing, waking and sleeping, growth and pause. Even Earth has its own periods of rest, dark seasons, long silences, where energy gathers, waiting for another unfolding. When humans forget that rhythm, we begin to think that letting go is failure. But in nature, letting go is often the condition for continuation. A leaf falls not because it has weakened, but because the tree must make space for what comes next. A wave dissolves not because it loses, but because that is how the ocean breathes. Alan Watts once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive, not to complete, not to arrive, simply to be present. And within that presence, there are moments of wakefulness and moments that need complete rest." Sleep is not an empty space in conscious life. It is an essential part of continuation. When you sleep, your body does not disappear. It works differently. It repairs. It organizes. It releases what is no longer needed. Like the ocean at night absorbing heat. Like forests in darkness exchanging gases at a slower rhythm. You do not need to do well at sleeping. You do not need to try to fall asleep. Sleep does not come from effort. It comes from permission. From the moment you stop asking whether you are enough, whether things are okay, whether everything is finished. Carl Jung once wrote, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong." But when night arrives, that pendulum does not need to swing anymore. It can rest in the middle. In a space that needs no meaning, no direction, only enough quiet for the body to remember how to care for itself. And perhaps the most comforting truth in all of these scientific stories is something very simple. You are not the only one resting right now. Across the planet, life is slowing down. Creatures burrow deeper, flowers close, cells reduce their activity. A very gentle synchronization is happening, whether you notice it or not. You are part of that flow. Not because you did anything right, not because you understood everything, simply because you are alive. And that is enough to be included. As you hear these words, if your eyelids have grown heavy, if your thoughts are dissolving into scattered images, let that happen. There is no need to hold on to the words, no need to follow the thread. This story does not require you to stay until the end. It was designed so you could leave at any moment, safely, because life will continue while you sleep. Corals will still release their seeds. Birds will still glide through rest. Earth will still breathe. And your body, faithful, patient, will be here when you wake, or simply carry you into deeper sleep. So if you are ready, you may let yourself sink a little more. No need to hold on to today. No need to prepare for tomorrow. Just be in this very quiet moment, where there is no task other than resting. I wish you a gentle sleep. And if you have already fallen asleep long ago, that is perfectly fine. If you are still listening, that is fine too. There's no need to return to the story. No need to remember where you are within it. Just know that, right now, everything is moving very slowly. Earth is still turning, not faster, not slower. The oceans still rise and fall in a rhythm older than any language. Forests still exchange moisture with the sky. The ground still holds the day's warmth, then slowly releases it into the night. Your body is doing the same. You do not need to watch your breathing. It knows how to find its rhythm. You do not need to keep your thoughts quiet. They will fade on their own, like distant sounds as you sink deeper. If an image appears, let it pass. If there is nothing at all, that is completely fine. You are not being left behind. You are not lost. You are simply doing what life has been doing for billions of years. Rest, and then continue. And even when you no longer hear these words, the story does not stop. It simply goes on, very softly, in a place you do not need to be awake to feel. Right now, your body is adjusting itself. No instructions needed, no thinking required. Your heartbeat slows in a very natural way. Your breath deepens, then becomes lighter again, finding its own rhythm. Your body temperature drops slightly, just enough to signal that it is time to rest. Your muscles no longer hold tightly. They release one small group at a time. Daytime hormones step back. Night signals arrive. There is no clear moment to name, only transition, soft and slow. If a thought briefly appears, it dissolves before you can grasp it. Your body has done this for thousands of nights. It remembers the way. You do not need to help. Just do not resist. Everything's okay. There's nothing to do, nothing to remember. You're being held, very gently. If there is sound, it is only background. If there are images, they will fade. No need to cling to dreams, no need to understand. Just rest, just drift. As life always does. Very slowly, very steadily. Here.